again. Welcome back to another episode of the Meebits Podcast. I'm Sergito. It's been a very exciting month, week, really the whole year in NFTs. And we are very honored to be here today with the newly appointed Yuga Labs CEO, our second Yuga Labs CEO to grace the Meebits Podcast, Michael Figge. Welcome. How are you, my friend?
What's up, man? Thanks for inviting me.
No, thanks for coming. It's been, I'm assuming, a very, very busy week. You're taking the reins of the biggest company in NFTs. You guys have obviously a handful of projects, a gigantic metaverse that you're building, IRL things, Clubhouse. Yet you've been on the podcast spaces circuit. You've been taking on, media that's against NFTs. It's just been a lot of fun stuff watching you operate. Here was week 2 of your leadership period at Yuga Labs. Before we jump in, though, I want to take the audience back maybe a few years. I know you're not part of the founding team of Yuga, but you did come in 2021 and kind of just quickly became one of the core members of Yuga. Can you just walk us a little bit through that?
Yeah. Actually, my first PFP that I ever bought was a Bored Ape. And so I joined June of 2021, like the first week. It was, I think the Bored Ape was like 1,000. I actually looked this up. It was like $1,300. So coming up on my mintiversary now, but it was one of those things where I bought in because it's still pandemic, so everybody's on Zoom, and I thought the Bored Ape Yacht Club, like as a word, as an idea, was just funny. And I think other people did too. And so I went, wow, like $1,300. That's a lot for basically like a picture. And, at the time, I think people were like, whoa, these CryptoPunks prices are getting like really, and the small fraction compared to what they are today, but like it was new. And I remember right after I bought it, I was like, woof, that was, and then it like tanked. It like went down to $800 and I was like, okay, cool. I'll never tell anybody that I've, I'll never, but I was like, nah, just commit to the bit. So, I made my Zoom profile picture and it was a cool thing, when you would hop on Zoom, like my camera is just off by default and so other people's would be, and then you would both hop on. And if they were a Bored Ape and you were a Bored Ape, it was kind of like a secret handshake where you're like, oh, okay, cool. Like, let's get to business. So it's great. And it kind of took me by surprise how cool of a project it wound up becoming, and how it would just have like such a great opinion on how to roll out different metas, like whether it was companions with the dogs or like breeding with the mutants, like that's from CryptoKitties. So I just thought it was like a really fun project to be a part of. But I didn't join until 2022. 2022, the fall of 2022 is when I joined through an acquisition of the company that I was running at the time called WENEW. And so the whole company came over and we joined at a time when there was like a lot of distress throughout our industry. I think it was the same week, like right after we joined, like that's when the FTX stuff started unraveling. I think it collapsed maybe the same week. So, because I remember we were going to go out with a tweet and then it was like, wait a minute, is FTX collapsing? Like, I don't think anybody's going to care about this tweet. So yeah, I've been at Yuga for like, a long time now, and I've seen the ups and downs. And I really think like now is a good time to kind of change up what we're doing, because I think there's a lot of indicators that show, if this is something that can come back in a strong way, and we have seen a lot of strength in the last 30 days, but if it really comes back in a strong way, that things that live multiple cycles actually wind up becoming like the strongest things that people allocate towards. So working towards that.
Amazing. Yeah, it's, you're 21, 22, the memories are. So it's going to be, I feel like we're going to be old one day, like, really old, and hopefully talking to like grandchildren or like, nieces, nephews, and you're telling stories of those days, and they're not going to believe it. They're going to be like, what? That makes no sense. But no, or hopefully, actually, better yet, they'll be like, oh yeah, totally. Like, yeah, digital assets, of course. Like that's what do you mean people were buying cardboard cards that were not verifiable and you had to mail them? So yeah, actually, I take it back. Our kids and their kids are gonna be like, yep, totally, of course, that makes sense. Pioneers. Um, 22 to 25th, I guess. A lot of changes, not just the Yuga, but the industry. You mentioned earlier, different metas. I think what really stood out to me, being a market participant, collector. Obviously, I was still a big member of like the Punks family and the community. Obviously, Meebits as well, and now taking the role of founder and CEO of Meepco over the last 14 months. But just always looking at Yuga from a distance, um, you guys lead the market in so many ways that is not financial per se, right? I feel like Bored Apes are the face of NFTs. Anybody, for good or for worse sometimes, right? When like people want to shit on NFTs, they'll put a Bored Ape picture, and we saw some of that last week that you called out. But what I'm getting at is, now that you're the leader of this organization, you're one of the big leaders in the industry, and you already were, but obviously elevated a little bit higher now. How do you think about leading Yuga in a way that continues that direction where like people look up to you guys, we look up to you guys for direction, like what obviously not just within the digital aspect, but IRL and everything else that you guys have been so innovative. Like what is that internal compass telling you right now about the direction that you're going to take the company?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like anybody in this role, that that's what you're stepping into. That people are looking for clues on what could be the next thing based off of how you operate. And I think balanced against that, we can do things that are harder for a lot of other folks in the space to be able to do, which on the one hand means we can take outsized risks that like I think would just not be entertainable by other folks. And then we can kind of plan things on a longer term horizon just because the resource that we have in terms of treasury. But, how do we play this differently? I think there was a lot of speculation, and I don't mean in terms of price. I think there was a lot of hypothesis, and like I was just talking to somebody and reminiscing. He was helping us out with like the launch of Dookie Dash, for instance, and it was like there's so much. There were so many people in 22 that was like, well, clearly the growth that's going to happen in Web3 is going to be specifically in gaming, and it's like, well, as somebody on the front lines of that back in 22, like I don't think anybody who was saying that was actually in the trenches verifying that. Like I think that we've had a lot of different ideas of what it looks like, and some of it is pattern matching against the old guard, like the existing things. But some of the most successful stuff has been completely novel and native to Web3. So the way that we're looking at moving forward right now is and I got to point out, it's a little bit different than it has been in previous years. In previous years, like you said, 14 months ago, we were overseeing Meebits, and it's not like we weren't putting resource towards it. It's just that at a certain point, you can only focus on so many things, right? And when you're not doing a good job, when you're not putting all your energy behind it, it just doesn't wind up looking like very much. Even if you spend a lot of money and time thinking about it, you do it over a long period of time, you have to be there like focused and decisive about it. And we just had too many chainsaws that we were juggling. And I think, Garga did a really good job from, it was first in 22, it was kind of like Daniel's year, and then Garga for 23, 20, like really just kind of getting us back to a level of simplicity and spinning out stuff that there were better people like yourselves who could like operate Meebits, in a better way, or Moonbirds in a better way, and just like making sure that we could land stuff that was important, but like was sort of, it was like, I think the misdiagnosis was like, oh, there's going to be a Web3 Disney. And I look around and I go like, I don't know if that model really works out, because in Web3 it seems like everybody wants their own cult leader. It seems like everybody needs a very clear leader. And when we had a bunch of IPs on one roof, even if we deliver for one project, the other project would be like, how come you can't deliver it that way for me? And it's like, well, they're siloed kind of things, you know, like they're they're not cross pollinated in that way. But like I think there's an assumption that they would be somehow. So I think we've really kind of come out of that full cycle. And, you know, obviously there's been like a large retracement throughout the industry, but I think that the negativity that came from all of those guesses about how it was going to work out, I think the retracement basically gives us an opportunity to like reset. And one of the things that I'm excited about, excuse me, is that we've got like thousands of new unique holders in the holder base. So that's a really great platform to build off of.
Yeah, no, you bring a really good point, which is, and I kind of, from my perspective, like watching you guys operate, bring all those brands under your roof, and then kind of just focus or refocus or triple your focus on the Yacht Club, Otherside, and ApeChain has been a learning experience. I mean, we tried to do a lot of different things. We saw some like low hanging fruits from Meebits from the years that maybe they didn't have the focus or the resources dedicated to them like we do with a fully focused team on them. But we've also learned that you can't be doing every single thing out there, and you really have to pick your lane and deliver an outstanding experience for those stakeholders. Which is why I think it's so significant to see you. The club to me has never really not been the priority. I mean, just from talking to Garga, obviously there was those years maybe with Daniel and some others where it was just trying to do more things, but I never saw like a focus away from the club. I think people will say, well, price went down and that's because there was no focus in the club. I think just external factors. I always see Yuga Labs and the Bored Ape Yacht Club as like pretty much one. But you've come in now and really just said, hey guys, like we're going to focus on this. You've been very, very vocal about it. And even without the market reaction, I feel like holders and apes have just joined that rally cry. New holders have come in. Man, I've been itching too. I'm like, man, should I get an ape? And have a full plate and an empty pocket. But it has been really, really inspiring. So just kind of like walk me through, how do you connect the experiences from 21, 22 with your own company, then early with Yuga, the bull, the bear, the bull, the bear, and then now with this future that you are embarking on, focused on the club, but also you also have some big endeavors that I would love to touch on later in the interview. But first, for the club, what's on your mind? What's like top three things? What are you focused on?
Yeah, I mean the three pillars for the club, and I'll have to get into them. They're like little lectures in the middle of them, little TED Talks. But like, I reflected a lot on what I thought made the Bored Ape Yacht Club the Bored Ape Yacht Club, and part of it was a lot of the growth and the rise of BAYC in 21 was before outside funding. It was even before royalties were like a proven out revenue stream initially. I think a lot of that stuff definitely contributed later, and it changed the game later. But the magic was really around the community and meeting other people in real life. So even though we're like all chronically online, we're on Twitter, we're on Discord, all these things, like I say it over and over, a good in real life experience is better than like a year of managing Discord. Like I think that when people get to know the other people behind the PFP, it makes you think about the token differently. And not everything is like that. If you go into meme coins, like I don't know that you would travel around and meet unless it's a very special situation. The whole time is different. The culture is different. I think with NFTs, you could, I was with a couple of folks a couple weeks ago, and they were talking about like how much money they spent on JPEGs or how much gas they spent on like the Otherside mints. And it's like, unless you have shared that experience with someone else, you could sound crazy, Um, but it's completely logical at the time. You understand the trade, you know? And I don't think it was a one-time thing. I think like at all times, the trades that we're doing, they're a little bit more complicated in NFTs because of the emotional connection. You really like connect with this character in a way that you don't really with like fungible tokens. Um, so in real life events, I think have been that was some of the first stuff we did as I took on the role in March, was doing these in real life events. We've done over 30 in real life events around the world. That's between ApeCo and BAYC. Like they've really done a great job of putting that together, but we don't want those to be a one-off. We want to like systematize that. We want to make sure that there's like a clear honor, because like that's another great thing. If you bring a friend, that's a really great grassroots top of funnel to get exposure to the club. And I think that is actually even more capital efficient than something like Ape Fest, which is like this more monolithic, you know, kind of bring everybody together. But like really, as if you look at any kind of community organization, like political, religious, they all organize by geography and they all have a standard cadence for meeting. They all do. And there's a reason for that. And it's because it's like you're more likely to stay engaged if the person is down the street from you and you meet with them often. Like that's community, right? So we're trying to get better at that. Especially if it's a club, you should do club things, right? That's the in real life component, and that'll probably extend to, you know, manifestations with the Clubhouse in Miami and beyond. For the second pillar, I'm really careful with this wording. I call it storytelling, right? And I know it's actually way cooler or like way more on vernacular to say like IP, or, you know, maybe the way that you grow the IP of flashy word would be AI. But like I think IP and AI, like I think actually it's storytelling is more of the thing that you want to look at, because it makes it more clear what you're trying to do for it. And you know, when you look at the human setup, like you read the book Sapiens, right? And you see like, well, every human can basically, we have a Dunbar number and there's around 300 people that you can maintain in your head. Like if you think about exactly how many people you can like actually care about, doesn't matter how many followers you have, like there's probably a max of about 300 people in your tribe. And we've been like evolved over a long period of time to get to that number, right? We're wired for 300 people approximately. But we organize in bigger numbers than that. And the way we do that is through story. And I think that if we really want to break out and go mainstream, we've really got to go for bigger stories about the Bored Ape Yacht Club. Why should we fall in love with the traits? Is it something beyond the JPEG? And for me, that's really like the anime. I think really going after the anime and not just making a trailer, but like really trying to go and make something bigger that's an asymmetric bet, you know? And then the third pillar, so just to recap, it's IRL, storytelling, and then style. And style is a special word too, because you could try merch, you could try apparel, you could try brand partnerships, but like all of that might not evoke like the right vibe. And so we call it style because like there is a certain type of partnership that we want to land. There's a certain type of product that we want to put out. And, you know, saying just apparel might confuse like what the point of it is, because, you know, scaling an apparel business is actually very difficult. It's not really like a venture capital backed thing unless you have trunk shows that go around the world all the time. And unless you're like putting the time into that business, scaling apparel is hard. But I do, and then merch is almost like the word kind of has a sense of disposability, and it doesn't really like have, you know, durable margins in the same way compared to other stuff that we do. But I think if you're a club, you've got to have stuff that's like your cut. It's not a uniform, but it's like, you know, you could tell when somebody's in a biker gang and they don't match, but they've got stuff that shows that they're in a biker gang, right? And so I think style is the third thing, because it ties into identity, it ties into a sense of belonging, a sense of progress. So I think with those three pillars, IRL, storytelling, and style, you know, it kind of inspires the right choices for the club to be making and pursuing. And you're seeing like the team is really unlocked right now to deliver on a lot of that stuff. We just had a great event with Snoop Dogg, right? And that was a great trade because it's like he's launching, a new location for his ice cream store. The mascot is a bored ape. Like, let's get a bunch of bored apes to show up. Bored apes want to spend 420 with Snoop. It's just like a perfect trade. And like, because we were looking for the right event, it made itself available to us. And I think that's the power of the pillars, right? Um, we'll obviously probably tune those over time, but those are for BAYC. I think some of the key things that will drive us forward.
Amazing, amazing. We love some good pillars. We have 4 at Meepco, and yeah, they help us when we're making decisions, determine whether it's something worth pursuing for the mission. So that's great to had not heard them before. I've been watching your podcast, your spaces, and I had not picked up on those. So I'm glad that we got those here. So just to recap, it is IRL, it is storytelling, and obviously style, which I see that, especially some of the latest things that you guys put out. Again, it's not, I have a different aesthetic myself. I think my personal background is a little bit different, but man, some of those hats, my black hoodie from Bored Ape Yacht Club is one of my favorite hoodies. I try not to use it too much anymore, because I made the mistake of washing it a couple of times, and like I'm afraid it's gonna get bad, but it hasn't. But I just really love it. Um, Talking about style, I think and you mentioned it with merch, a lot of other market participants and industry participants really overweight, kind of like those types of things. And maybe not so much for identity as it is for like, oh, we nailed this partnership. If I look at the industry over the last 3 years, right, with this whole bear market, let's call it, the reality is that there's been incredible partnerships, incredible, collaborations with all kinds of brands, and that has not really been reflected too much in what people care about in the space, at least today, which is the floor price. How's your strategy different on the style sector beyond having something that if I wear it, people can tell I'm a bored ape, and or I can tell somebody's a bored ape. How are you thinking about those two things? Because honestly, as a founder, it's something that we think about a lot, which is, as you said, physical is difficult. It's expensive. It's inventory, shipping it to all your members. We have members in like 80 countries, or collectors in 80 countries. Like it gets a little bit tough from a business perspective. We still do it because we love people representing, and you guys obviously do that. But how are you thinking as a founder of kind of like just approaching that guess barbell that we see from our perspective when it comes to physical merch?
Yeah. You know, what we do is still considered by many to be like very weird. Like this idea of, trading JPEGs and stuff. And the way I look at all of that stuff is we need to give handles. We need to place handles on this stuff for new entrants to be able to get a grip on what we're doing. And sometimes when you're able to realize this digital thing in a physical space, it gives people handles to grab onto it and to pull themselves up and onto your platform. And, this is one of the reasons why we revised the Bored Ape Yacht Club website. If you go to BAYC.com, we used to have like a very theatrical, artistic, colorful experience that was almost like you were going into like a LucasArts game where you knock on the door of the club, you enter into the club. It is very like literally a clubhouse. Like you see booths over here, you see a bar over there. And what made that approach tricky is it was kind of hard to surface information about like what it is we do. Like it kind of shows like a cool experience, but with the new website, I could show there's a grid of activations where we've worked with BMW, Rolling Stone. Like you have all of these things, and you can very quickly find the caliber of brands that we work with, the caliber of activations we've done in the past. And that makes it easier for people to compose with us, right? For them to even, it doesn't always have to come from us. Maybe a partner has their own idea and they show it to us, right? And I think that the physical stuff is a really good way to give potentially new holders handles. And I think if they like that stuff enough and they get curious enough with your brand, I do think it eventually leads to looking into digital assets to see like what is it that's really, what's at the root of that's inspiring all of these things. And that's true whether it's like a less tangible experience like 420 with Snoop Dogg, or if it's like, the cigar box that we're doing with Scandinavian Tobacco Company that we just announced today. Um, I don't know that, like, it takes a lot to build these brands. I'm under no, I'm not naive about how long it takes to actually be competitive especially if you were to go consumer products or something like that. But I also think that, maybe the answer for the Bored Ape Yacht Club lies somewhere else, because we are more of a club and it isn't really for everybody. Like, some people might not be able to connect with it. Maybe another brand is better for them. But I'm hoping that by getting sharper with our personality, if it is for you, you're really going to be into it. And I think that like having those true fans is going to be more valuable later. So like, yeah, like sometimes style, it manifests as it's less as like apparel revenue and it's more of a content play. And I think that's okay, right? But you do have to figure out, where the business goes in other places. Like, I don't think that without a lot of other work, without actually putting something like an anime out where there's like a platform where, hundreds of millions of people can watch what your story is about, then it is hard to just go straight to merchandising an IP.
Oh, definitely. It's a good perspective. It's something we've learned over the last year as well. Very dedicated base of holders, but obviously, if you want to sell things to a wider population, you really need to develop that IP. All right, so I'm working my way back from your pillars. So we talked about style. Let's talk about storytelling. I feel like that's the one where maybe I haven't really developed a good kind of just idea of what you guys are doing. Maybe it's probably the least defined one, at least from my perspective. Obviously, I was at Ape Fest in Vegas. It was my first Ape Fest. Thank you guys for the invitation. I remember being there for like 20 minutes, turn around to the Meep Co team, and I was like, oh man, I get it now. Like I really get it. It was such a great time, and I loved just my experience personally with Web3 events, mostly like punk events, and obviously punks are a little bit different when it comes to type of stuff we like to do. More quiet, brunchy. Like very different. But I always felt like you get the most honest hugs when you go to a Web3 event of your community, because it's people that you've known for a while, and you see them once a year, or maybe it's the first time you meet them. And I saw a lot of people hugging each other at Ape Fest, and that sounds a little weird when I say it out loud, but I was like, wow, yes, okay, I get it. Like, I totally get it. And you guys announced the anime. Tell us a little bit more about how you're thinking. I heard you say in a space or a podcast that Garga is now stepping into obviously the chairman role, and really getting free time to do what he does best. He said he's a trained poet, and so how are you guys splitting kind of like those responsibilities? What's the direction that it may taking, and how are you personally thinking about it, and how's your organization thinking about it?
Yeah, I mean, you know, look, the founders invented the Bored Ape Yacht Club. Like, nobody's going to understand that idea and what it is and it isn't better than them, right? Like, I can make my best guesses at it from what I've experienced, but I think it would be actually like really difficult to do a good job of creating an anime that's authentic to the brand without their input, right? And I mean, I actually just had a big meeting with them last night and the producers, but I think we're going to get into the weeds on, you know, uh, not right this second, but very soon, probably like next week, maybe week after. It's just like, we've got Ibiza next week too. So there's just like, we're trying to space things out so they don't like get lost in the noise. But I think it'd be great just to like have me, Gordon, and Garga just review some of the like, the artwork and the dailies from the anime, and just like, don't even edit it, just post it. I think the community would love that stuff, so that they would really understand, like, yeah, but how are they involved? Like, here, I'll just record a Zoom call with the three of us talking, and you'll get to see it. But we don't want to give away any like the big story points, right? So, the storytelling also manifests in smaller ways too. Like, I think that in Web3, the way that you post regularly communicates a lot about the brand. And the take that we've been kind of taking, and I think that we've been doing a really good job of it, is almost like these Adult Swim bumpers is what we post on like Twitter. And it's just like, and we what we post on Twitter is different from what we post on Instagram, but it's these like kind of like irreverent takes that we think the brand stands for. And it's not like a continuous story in that way, but you're almost telling a short story. And like, the other day you've got Gary and he's standing with a screwdriver and there's a car behind him and carved into the car says, "I love BAYC." Right. And it's just like, that's funny. And so I think, when you're posting content too, it shouldn't just be, I think we were in a time where we would only post with an asset or something if we had an announcement to make. And that's not fun. Like, yes, you should have announcements, but like, we almost just go out with just text nowadays for our announcements. And like what we put our effort in, our artwork in, is like making sure that the moments between the announcements, we're actually expressing our brand, and short stories that are just like funny. And I think that's another hook that kind of like brings people in, and makes them curious about the brand.
Yeah, I've definitely like the content that you guys have been putting out over the last couple months. It's funny because we explore a little bit of that, not like the funny Adult Swim, but maybe you have like the nostalgic kind of old ad vibe to some of the posts, and we explore that with Meebits. But to your point, it's not really our voice. But one day I'll have to show you some of the stuff that we cooked up so that you can see like the parallels. Because when you guys started posting, I was like, yeah, that fits the Bored Ape Yacht Club.
And that's just it, right? Like, I can tell you our answer, but if you try to do our answer, it won't look like, you'll try to sound like us, but it won't be you guys. And that's true with any project. I think if you're not finding your own unique solution, then it'll feel like borrowed language and it won't come off authentic.
Totally, can become a riff, right? And nobody really wants to be at the riff here. So that's storytelling. Let's go back to IRL. Obviously, huge excitement amongst your club members. The Miami Clubhouse. I feel like it's a place that's already very wrapped in mystery, which just adds to the allure. Obviously, we talked about how hard it is to do physical merch, physical clothing. A building is 100 times much more difficult. It requires a lot of things. So I am hoping that your club members and everybody gives you the grace and time that is needed to really deliver something of this scale that I think you guys are putting together. But people want to know, when, what can you share with us about? We've seen the vision, we saw the kind of like the mood boards, the design at ApeFest. You guys have recirculated that, but any updates on, again, like what's Figge's spin on it, as far as like how are you putting your vision in it, or is that also a founder thing, and are you just executing on their behalf? Like, give us a little bit of an update here on the Miami Clubhouse.
Yeah, I know a lot of people want to know details. Where is it? What's going to be like? Show us the I know, but its time will come. Like I say, we have like stuff, and I just want to make sure things don't get lost in the noise. And also, like, yeah, the practical reality is like it's something that's tethered to things we don't have, municipal permits, and like there's real life stuff that is not the same speed as like Claude code engineering, right? Like there's physics you've got to deal with there. And so its time will come, but for right now, I think the focus on like getting people connected at a geographically global level, and I still think that there's a lot of work to do there that could probably give the club a better return than just us over zoning in on this one thing, which is important. But like, I still think that there's a lot of room to improve the network effect of the community worldwide. And like, honestly, I think that's going to be a major focus in the coming weeks.
That's great. And we've seen it. I mean, I just see the post left and right from people like, hey, we're doing a meetup in Texas, LA. I know Cam took people out to a baseball game that ended up getting canceled. And so they went to the casino pit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool. I feel like the community focus kind of came back in, not from your perspective of the actual community people. I feel like sometimes folks just sit there waiting for things to happen. And I'm seeing them reinvigorated, really taking matters in their own hands and being like, yo, we are the club. It's part of this broader ecosystem. I'm gonna take it on, my responsibility to host something, to launch something. Almost reminds me a little bit like Made by Apes, but instead of product is IRL. How are you guys? Are you guys incentivizing that? How are you guys thinking about? You mentioned earlier like formalizing it. What can you share with us in that regard?
Yeah, I think going through this first pass, it's good to like kind of like piece it together and to make sure that everybody has a venue, or like if there's a bill we can help pick up so that it's like a little more frictionless, like we can see about like a subsidy there. um, but it's still a lot of organizing effort, and I think what we need to do is kind of like have a stable cadence for it, and maybe even like stable locations for them, because if you're always fumbling for like what's the itinerary, like where is it again, like it should be a very clear thing to communicate worldwide on a per region basis, like where that on ramp is if somebody wants to join or is curious about it, or wants to meet up. So I think there's some improvements that we're working on there, and some systems we're putting in place to make that easier, because um, I also think like the meetups, it's really exciting at first, but what happens over time, and I know we've just done one, but I'm already like playing this movie forward. It's like you don't want people just to be attendees. You really want participants, right? Not attendees. And I think when people are participating and they actually have an impact and they have a role and they develop an identity in that region, like that's when you create something that's stickier, and they can take initiative beyond, some centralized authority saying like, we're all going to do this now. Like, I think that the next body of work that we've got to do in the meetups is transforming attendees into participants. And that's going to be hard. But I think if you're able to do that unlock, it really takes a load off of, BAYC, Yuga, ApeCo, and it really puts the power closer to, the local regions, where they'll probably have more leverage, more impact than we could have from far away.
It's a great idea. Obviously, going with the decentralization theme that we're all operating on. All right, so shifting gears a little bit, we spent 35 minutes talking about the Yacht Club, which obviously it's the crown jewel of Yuga Labs. But you guys also took a big bet. You've been building Otherside. I know you personally have been commandeering that project for the longest time. A lot of different moving pieces, a lot of different chapters to its story, both as a world, as a game, but also as a development. You guys brought in a new team to help with the engineering and all that stuff. Can you give us a quick update as to what Otherside is, where it is right now, both as a game and a world, but also from kind of like the organizational, Yuga Lab corporate perspective? What's the work being done and the plans for it?
Yeah. Maybe some backstory for people if they haven't heard, if they're new to the space or something. Otherside was a mint that took place in May of 2022. Actually, we're recording this on the fourth anniversary of the mint. And I wasn't at Yuga at the point. At that point, I was outside as a collector, and it's famous for a very big gas wars, like one of the biggest gas wars ever on Ethereum. And I think it was one of those like such a popular event. It really shows you like why, because of Ethereum's design, you need something like a layer two or something like your own chain to run it. Because if you're paying that much money to transact, like that's a huge barrier to entry for most people. And even when we were doing stuff like the first round of heavy metal, it was just like, okay, are people really, are people loving paying $30 for one transaction for the game? It's like, this is not sustainable. And I think we've all followed Vitalik's road of, the way that he called it out was like, the way that this system scales is through, layer twos, right? He's since like kind of walked that back in January. I don't know, like, I don't think the industry is as vocal and outraged as it should be that he's trying to walk this back. But I think he sees what the market's saying, like other L1s that don't have L2s on them that just scale like a Solana, like the market's saying that they might like that more.
So what, just real quick interruption. Ethereum EVM L2s just passed Solana TVL actually this week. And so maybe Vitalik is wrong.
Maybe Vitalik is wrong. Like he's just like he's another founder running another project that has its own windy road, right? But so one of the things is ApeCoin existed, and when I was here, there was an ApeCoin DAO, and they're voting stuff into existence. And one of the big things is like, okay, ApeChain. Like it seems like if we're saying we need our own chain that's like purpose built and has low fees, we should do ApeChain. So once ApeChain came out, I started looking around and I'm like, the next logical thing to think about here is because like it was a phase where like there was a lot of scaling solutions coming out, a lot of like layer 2 chains. It seemed like everybody had a layer 2 chain. But there is no Uniswap fork or Pump Fund fork, or like there is no clone of an app that you could bring here and it would be better than what the original was on the original chain. Like what you need for a chain to be successful is your own app. And I would say like in the case of Base, it's not the Base app. I think it's Coinbase. I would say on Solana, it's probably Pump Fund. And, for us, to me, the answer seemed clear. It's like, it's Otherside. It's this project that people bought into that hasn't yet been delivered, that is still under construction. And like, that's what needs to be delivered. So yeah, I kind of started going in the trenches, and it had gone down a windy development path. And part of that was like, Yuga went through different people managing it, and there was different opinions on how to go about developing it. And we were also developing with outside partners in concert. So like there's a lot of complexity to roll that out. Now a lot of that has been simplified in that like we've actually, as of we announced the acquisition in December, we finished it in February, but we acquired basically the tech platform, the talent, the team, that was once an outside partner. Now they work with us internally at Yuga, and that's Emporium and M Squared. So we kind of actually have a way to pursue a bit of a moat here, where like we can create these Unreal Engine experiences, and have mass concurrency as a built-in option. And like we are a social first feature in a game engine that can do that. And like everybody else, you kind of cap out at 100 players. Like we just had the Daniel Arsham drop here this morning, and you had like hundreds of people lined up, like picking up their tickets, checking their wallets, and it was all in like 3D. Before, in 21, 22, whenever there's like a white list or an allow list or something, it's just everybody hitting refresh on the website until it like crashes. You get the Cloudflare 404 or something like that, right? Here it's really cool because like you could actually like see everybody else in line clamoring for the allow list. You could like see them in 3D, which is cool. But yeah, I basically spent the last year very deep in Otherside, and a year ago you couldn't even go into Otherside. Like it wasn't on. We were always talking about what could happen. So it's a huge jump from like last year to this year, but I think we got to make another huge jump from this year to next year.
And is that huge jump going to be driven by, I know you're pushing a lot of like the ODK collectors or other builders coming in and creating within that world? Is that going to be a Yuga development, an ApeCo development? Like, how do you see a year from today, you make that big move? What drove it?
It's a novel platform, so opportunity can show up fast, and most of the time you're driving with like fog lights on. Like you have an idea of where you're going to go, but UGC is definitely a way that most platforms, like user generated content, implies that like kind of Ethereum is a UGC platform, right? Like most people, not the Ethereum Foundation, most other people make the content that's on Ethereum. And the way that UGC manifests, we could take our best guess, right? Like we could say it's the ODK, because like if you look at Roblox, it's people that are able to make their own experiences and deploy them. So we've got something that lets you like go all the way down to Unreal Engine, and you can build your own experience on our tech stack, and you could launch it. We've also, on the other end of the spectrum, got a much more simplified version, which is like you can release your own avatar, or you could release a sticker pack, stuff like that. So that's way less technical. And then somewhere in between, we have something called metaverse markup language, which is like a vibe codable language. Like you could literally use ChatGPT, Claude, and say, hey, I want an MML world based off of the Meebits. I want a bodega, and I want like a postal service truck in front that's always driving around the bodega. And it will code that up. And then you could take that file and drop it into Otherside and it'll work, which is crazy. It's still early days on some of that stuff, but I think the end goal is UGC. Exactly what format that manifests in is still probably discoverable, because like the thing that I see that is surprising is we've got over 500,000 unique avatars and over 200 communities in Otherside, and that number is like far and away like a bigger metric than any other kind of like UGC that exists. And it's almost counterintuitive. You have to like look at like that signal and you go like, okay, if I'm just like a normal person, I'm asking, I already have an avatar, why do I need more than one? That's not logical, right? But like it goes back to like, well, you would want more than one because collectors collect. And like some people have hundreds of avatars because like they want to be able to oh, Meebits are in, I got better put my Meebit on, I'm now in a Meebit thing. Oh, apes are in, I'm gonna put my ape on. Oh, it's actually a mutant thing, so I'm gonna put my mutant on, And like it is very normal if you look at collectors and they have a wall of bear bricks or vinyl toys or whatever. It isn't abnormal for them to own more than one. They don't go, oh, I already have a bear brick, so I'm never going to get another bear brick. It's like, no. I want to collect the set, right? And so that's what we've seen with like, we're doing a test today, this rollout with Daniel Arsham. I think we're going to see a really interesting signal come from taking one of the best collectionists on the planet and fusing him with this new medium and the Voyager, which I think is like a digital bear brick. And we're going to see, it's only 300 editions. They're $200. It's April 30th when we're recording it today. So like probably by the time people are listening to this, like we'll be further down in that experiment. But I actually think that that's a really interesting signal for the space to watch, because I do think that people will find an appreciation for that specific avatar more than they would other avatars. And it's like the emotional connection and the story around it is the reason for that. And so how do you compose it so that like, Otherwise, like, what's the difference between one avatar with one design and another avatar with another design? So the story is really important. The reason why you collect is really important. The system for collecting is important. So we're always in a sense of discovery, but like there is a steady drumbeat of events coming on Otherside, and we're building towards, people walking on their other deeds and competing in like the resource game, which is when all these resources start emitting, and that's going to be a fun time.
We're very aligned there. I think on the Otherside point about having different avatars, it's something that obviously we're building alongside with you guys with the football collectibles that we release, and we're releasing a lot more. I agree with you. Like what you're wearing makes a difference for us. NFTs are about group identity and belonging, and so that's why we have the football collectibles with their jerseys of all the different countries that are playing in the World Cup. And to us, the idea is same, right? Like if you are a German person or fan and you want to walk through the other side, maybe when the games are happening, or you want to go play, in the soccer pitch, you put on that football collectible. But maybe there's like you said, like you can't get into the Yacht Club with the Meebits thing, so you put on your Bored Ape or your Mutant, and you do that. And maybe there's a bubbles for, I don't know, one of the other collections that live there. And so it's really cool to be able to, just like in real life, have different, you have a suit, you have a jersey, you have a coat, you have, I wear Speedos every morning to swim. Like I wouldn't wear them outside, but that's my avatar in the pool. And it's something that, props to you guys. It's been so easy for us to release stuff on Otherside and really give our collectors something of value beyond just like, hey, here's is something that you can put on your Twitter PFP or share on Instagram. You can actually be that in Otherside and participate and so on with that. So that's been pretty cool from our perspective.
Nice. Yeah, and I'm hoping more people, I think you've been pretty like, you've had an eye for like, okay, if Yuga's making it, I don't know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the feeling I get from you is like, look at how much money Yuga's putting into it, and they're just going to let us use this stuff to help our community out. Why don't we use it? And I wish more communities would see like, hey, all the money we're spending, you can amortize it too. Like you guys can, instead of having to stand up this whole thing, you could really have a cost effective activation that brings a lot of joy to people. And if you could put in a little bit of a prize, like that's super motivating to people. I was like at the very early days on Otherside, we had almost no features, but you could send ape to people. And I literally just had a bag of ape and I was just like giving people 2 ape, 3 ape. And it's not even much, but like it was showing people, look, I'm transacting, I'm putting like real things in your wallet, and that's a pretty cool thing. I love what you guys are doing with the World Cup. Also, I think it's just like a great way to catch, you know, you have your eye out and you're like, oh, the World Cup is coming out. So like I could probably seize on some of that zeitgeist and put it in this digital format. We just did an activation with that, with Artemis, like we had like, we played with gravity and like the lack of gravity, and we put a moon up in the sky for Otherside. We didn't know if it would be a hit or not. And it turned out to like, I think Artemis kind of took the world by storm a little bit because like it was so smooth that we were going back to the moon. I don't know. Like it's just been, you see SpaceX launches all the time now, but like to see something that's like, oh no, this one's different because this one's going to go around the moon. It was kind of a different tone for everybody. And so like that was a gamble for us. And, it is kind of like one-off work, but it is showing people, it's reminding people like, oh yeah, we can like play with different levels of gravity too. And like, that's another feature in this world when you're thinking of your experiences.
Yeah, and I loved your Chinese New Year activation too with the fireworks and the launchers. We were there. I mean, that was a lot of fun. And you're totally right. I mean, we obviously we're part of the Yuga family of sorts, right? You guys are investors in Meepco, and we work closely together on some stuff. But this is a business decision as well for us, in that hey, this amazing game that's being developed. Obviously, Meebits were created by Larva Labs to be digital avatars in worlds and metaverses. Like, yeah, let's leverage that and give our holders kind of like the avenue for them to really enjoy these digital sculptures that Ben and John created for that purpose. So it's been really cool. I mean, can't wait to get Metropolis fully back online. I know maybe for people who don't know, that was the first actual Otherside playable world, but it was built on a previous version of the tech. So it needs a lot of updating, and you guys are focused on building Otherside, and we're focused on our stuff. But eventually, hopefully, we'll get it back online. There's plenty of things to do in the Nexus anyways, and we've hosted a lot. We've hosted, we have bi-weekly game nights. We've done all kinds of contests. We have soccer matches. It's been a lot of fun, and shout out to not just the Otherside team, but the ApeCoin team that's been out there supporting us, matching our prices and so on. It feels like we're building together, which is what I wanted to get to at, not just a business decision of let's leverage this guy's spend, but it's like, let's build the space together in a direction that I think will really benefit all of us, and kind of like, 1+1 = 3, which is, for me, is really what caught my attention about Web3 as I started, going beyond collecting stuff on like Nifty Gateway. It was like, how can we really just all work together to build something bigger and better? Which leads me to my final topic of conversation. I just realized time has been flying by. The industry today, obviously, bear markets, bring out the claws sometimes. Bear markets humble people, right? People that went from, thinking they were one thing, and now obviously, realizing that cycles are part of human nature, and sometimes you're at the very top, and next thing you know, you're not anymore. And so, what's your read on the industry today as it stands? Obviously, there's things that need to be fixed, let's say, or done better. What do you think those are? And if you had a wish list for, Web3 NFTs at the end of 2026, what will that be?
I think we've come out of, and of course, this is like something I was very vocal about on the timeline this past week, but like, I think we have come out of a pretty brutal like nosedive. I actually think like there's an opportunity here for us to turn around. So if there's no like macro thing, and that's the other thing, like you're so at the whim of like, if somebody says like, hey, there's gonna be a new tariff, or like, hey, guess what, the Strait of Hormuz is closed, like what does that have to do with my product? Like, fortunately, everything, because we're attached to the financial markets, right? So like there are definitely macro forces that like can impede, but in the event that they don't, I think that we have gotten to a point where you've heard all the same phrases that were said about Bitcoin, and each cycle's, coin, where it's like, oh, well, it was a fun ride, but it's actually over, or, oh, isn't the 4-year cycle dead, or aren't cycles dead? Like, I feel like the cycle doesn't exist anymore. It's like people say this stuff every cycle, right? And so it makes me think like we have the potential to actually break through, and the goal, I think, for digital assets, especially this class of digital assets, is to once again break through the mainstream. Because I think if you do it the second time, you're sticking around. You know, I think if you do it the second time, you're sticking around, and people are going to pay attention from there on out. And it's really up to us. It's really up to this community. It's really up to the people who are participating. That means, if you see stuff that you're not aligned with, that you think could be a danger, or like not good practices for our industry, you got to call it out. And I think at the same time, if you are in this industry, I'd caution against being too cynical, because it might not make, you hear it the whole cycle, like, oh, you guys are collecting a bunch of monkey JPEGs. And it's like, it's more than that. And I really advise you to try collecting a Meebit, try collecting a mutant, or, with ApeChain now, we've got a lot of great communities that are very accessible price points. And I think you could start by really interacting there, and people will help each other, and you can kind of work your way up to a bigger and bigger asset. But yeah, just caution against being too cynical. Of course, like, we love a good shit post, but like, I think that we don't want to be a self-fulfilling prophecy in the other direction, where we're so bearish on ourselves, or like we make too many jokes, we scare away people that might actually be like super into this. So yeah, that's kind of my take right now, is like, I feel like we went through this really brutal consolidation period, and the goal for, the next year is to really be like, can we break through the mainstream again in a new way? Because with this level of consolidation, with this level of conviction, I mean, you've got people, at least in the Bored Ape Yacht Club, that rode it all the way up to like $500,000. That's myself included, like all the way up and then all the way back. And it's like, if you can come back up again, like, that's when people start to pay attention, So we don't control the markets. You and I both know this. We don't control the markets, but I think what we can do is signal that we're out here, we're communicating, we're getting on podcasts, we're putting initiatives together, we're sharing our rationale for those initiatives. And for me, that means like creating a signal with the Bored Ape Yacht Club, making sure that outside of that, Otherside is a place that can bring everybody together and everybody can win there. And outside of that, the biggest concentric circle for me is really like the network effect of ApeCoin, tying it all together, is something that I just want to make sure is as clear as possible for people that are curious about our ecosystem, and that we tidy up all of these like loose ends that can be better. And I remember you used to call me up and be like, hey man, you got to fix this button on this page because it's going to be terrible for SEO. Like, you used to always call me up for that type of stuff, and I appreciate it, man.
Hey, we're building together, man. I appreciate what you guys are doing. All right, I got 2 more questions before I let you go here. At some point in the future, right, we're all going to look back on our careers, our lives. What do you want your legacy as Yuga Labs CEO to be?
Man, it's so hard. It's so hard to like pre-write your eulogy, in that way. Like, I think I
I'm
don't
not
think
saying you're going to die.
yeah,
Like
no,
20 years, you'll decide to retire and, buy a yacht and like.
yeah, I think success for me is like everybody who bet on Otherside actually got to experience something that was truly a unique thing that could be referenced by a lot of people, that will often be copied in the future. Like, that's really important. I think the Bored Ape Yacht Club could truly cement its role as the best club on the internet, and that extends to hopefully the best club in the world for this type of stuff. I think that there's a certain temperament, like, of course, when there's a lot of money involved, you attract all sorts of personalities, all sorts of people along the spectrum. Not everybody's going to get along. There's going to be drama. But I hope that also we are known as a club that really has great hospitality. And that's something that I've talked about on another podcast. And now that I've seen it twice, I've really got to think about it. Because like, I boil hospitality as, I used to work in entertaining lots of people. Hospitality to me is like, I thought about you before you got here. right? That's the phrase. I thought about you before you got here. And whether it was a concert or a live event or a brand thing, I think that like when you can approach a product that way and do it successfully, people can feel it even if they can't put their finger on it. And I think that that mentality should bleed through to everybody who wants to, make a dent in the Bored Ape Yacht Club. Like if somebody is in your town and they're new to the club, like you will show them hospitality. You will show them what the club is all about, and hopefully it makes them want to be in it more. So, um, it's not really a pillar, but it is a thought that I've been having as a value. I'm turning over in my head.
That is something that I hadn't heard before, to be honest. And I, as somebody who didn't like board apes at the beginning, when I think about it, it was because people were not hospitable. At least the people that I was interacting with at the time. Obviously, that's changed a lot, and some of my best friends are hardcore apes, and I just love the community. I can go into Ape Fest in Vegas. Like, obviously, my mind had been changed way before that, but just really put it into mind how like this is just a really cool club. But I think putting hospitality up there alongside those values, even if it's not a pillar, is something that you don't really hear a lot. So I appreciate that. That's kind of like one of the things that you want to leave the club behind eventually when you retire onto like your 200 feet long own Bored Ape Yacht Club on a yacht club. Um, so thank you. And yeah, before I let you go, though, obviously it's the Meebits podcast. So we'd love to get your thoughts on Meebits, not Meepco, but Meebits. What do you think about Meebits? How do you see them? Your role as Yuga CEO, obviously you guys have a huge bag of Meebits and obviously a stake in Meepco. But yeah, more your perspective on Meebits and your opinion on them.
Yeah, I think Meebits are born out of a really interesting extension of Larva Labs and what they were doing. And I think you've been doing a good job of capturing the heritage of that and extending that into like new realms. Like I actually really like the World Cup idea that you have and how like there could be custom jerseys and stuff like that. Um, I think the natural place for Meebits is extending into like 3D use that's like interoperable as everywhere as possible. Like, I think Meebits actually have more portability when it comes to like a 3D asset because of their simplicity than like even Bored Apes have. Like I think you could put them into very, very, very like platforms that don't demand a lot of like topology. Like it's just like they're very simple characters, right? Um, and in particular, I think like the way that you're able to frame them up as like, yeah, they are collectible, they are art, um, that has this kind of like museum grade heritage. I think it's an interesting position that nobody else really has in the same way. But I would probably try to continue to like differentiate, like even though they rhyme with CryptoPunks, I would try to differentiate by like leaning into the 3D aspects a little bit more because in some ways I find like CryptoPunks as cool as they are to be stoic, like they're just, the flat 2D image, but I feel like Meebits can be in a much more immersive and kind of like dimensional world. And maybe that's part of, I just like worked a lot on Metropolis and Otherside. So I imagine like what the cars were shaped like, what the buses were shaped like. And I actually think there's a lot of room. Like maybe what you should do is just package up all of the Meebits 3D assets from, Otherside and like open them up so that anybody in the community can kind of like, where with like vibe coding and Claude is headed, like I feel like the tools to be able to make content are going to be democratized rapidly. And what you want to do is have the Legos ready to go so that like Claude's going to know how to grab those Legos and put them into the thing that you're asking it to do, right? So I don't know, like, everybody finds their own path, but those are just the top of mind thoughts that I have on.
No, I love it, and we've kind of done a little bit of that. We do have a skills file that people can pull over all of our public site assets, so the GLBs, not the like real 3D models, but the GLBs for the Meebits, traits, metadata, and all that stuff. But you mentioned the Metropolis assets, which we do have, and they're amazing. Obviously, you guys designed those, so I'm definitely down to put those on that public side situation and letting people continue to build on those. I think GVZ is doing such a great job creating those types of content and so on with their community. So I appreciate the idea. I think definitely we'll definitely look into executing that.
Yeah, it's already there, so might as well.
Yeah, no, man, what an exciting conversation. It's for me, you and I, like you said, we've talked a lot, but I feel like it's always operational things, right? Like, hey, this, hey, that. Um, and so I do appreciate you coming on, and not just with me, but the Meebits podcast audience, sharing the vision for the Yacht Club, for obviously Yuga Labs, for Otherside, and then how you're tying it all together around ApeChain. I think it's a very exciting time to be building in your ecosystem or alongside your ecosystem. So obviously we're cheering for you guys. We're cheering for everybody that's doing the right thing, and obviously being honest and ethical in the space. So yeah, thanks again, Figgy, for stopping by. And yeah, we'll love to eventually see Metropolis go back live, and have a bunch of apes running around, as well as every other community that exists in Otherside today and in the future.
Yeah, love that, man. Well, thanks for having me on, and hope I can come back soon.
Sounds good. And thanks for watching. This was the Meebits Podcast with Figgy, the new Yuga Labs CEO. We'll see you around the other side. Thanks, y'all.